I am going to be talking about equity and access, socio-cultural impacts in the criminal justice system. I am going to be starting off with law enforcement and their biases in policing. Something that I would say would be racially profiling, um, is kind of the main one, really, I feel. And another one that I think that would be taken into account would be how people are presenting themselves as far as like classes. If you're, you know, maybe if you're dressed a little homeless, I guess, in like the least offensive way, that might cause like draw more attention to you and maybe not in the way that you want it to. And that could cause a little bit more of an aware in a officer's mind, possibly. Inappropriate arrest would be another one. Like being too forceful, if they're getting arrested and like George Floyd had ended up losing his life, and other things at the cost of officers, um, would cause more people to act out. And I think they do that in fear. Um, I think this kind of goes into my next point for escalated interactions. It was an interesting point because it basically, when I was doing the research, it was basically saying like understanding each other's backgrounds. And I think that's kind of interesting for this case, in this situation, I guess. Um, but it makes sense because I think when somebody doesn't understand something to the fullest extent, they're a little bit weary of it. And I think when you have people who are from different backgrounds and talk in a certain way or present themselves in a certain way as an officer who's like trying to get his job done and trying to um, do what he's getting paid to do, I guess it could come off as the person trying to be disrespectful when they're, not. Maybe they're talking about a little bit more aggressively, um, and that comes off as disrespectful or trying to antagonize the officer, or the type of slang they use or something like that. Um, I don't think we should be calling officers bruh or things like that, but I think when we understand and try to get other perspectives of each side, I think that could help in certain situations, especially when it comes to officers and people of color. People of color tend to be more in fear and less trusting of the government and law enforcement just because of countless deaths caused by law enforcement, and just the overall how people of color are treated in specifically America, and how they don't have as many protections as someone that isn't a person of color. But yeah, the next thing I wanted to get into was the courts and how they can be biased and how it can kind of um, not necessarily be fair. One of the things was prosecutors could be biased. They could seek longer longer what's sentencings. And I think in this case, like I think it wouldn't necessarily just stop at race. I think religion, sexual orientation, maybe if you're someone who's outwardly has talked about not supporting the government or police officers or anything of that sort, I think that also plays a part into how you're treated. Because if they see you as the enemy, they're not going to treat you like a friend. Um, and for judicial biases, judges can have their own biases, and that could be because lack of diversity on the bench. And that same goes for jury. If it's an all-white jury and a black man, not saying it's 100% true, but there could be a possibility of some biases in that jury, from past experiences or just how they're raised, or maybe the person doesn't share the same beliefs as they do. I think can also play a huge part in how um, we determine things. I think we all have biases. It's like, I think, like when we go to class, like, do we really want to be there? Most likely not, if it's early in the morning or something like that. Um, and access to legal resource. I think this one was interesting. Um, the socioeconomic status affects a person's outcome in a way, because if you don't have the finances to be able to hire a attorney, a private attorney, you'll get a state appointed one. The state will give you one, and these people have like hundreds of more cases that they're working on. They probably don't get paid as much as they probably should for the work they do, and um, they you're just kind of a number in the system. That's kind of how I perceive it, and they're overworked, so that's kind of gives you a disadvantage on how you're going to be represented in the court proceedings. For correctional disciplinary actions, this is like for the jail when you're actually in jail, um, and how officers and also inmates can treat you, and how you can um, basically be treated like shit and get no protection from guards, or guards could try to get people to jump you or hurt you or just make your life living hell, because again, you are of a race they don't particularly like, or you don't share the same political views, or they had read in your report that you don't like cops or something along those lines. I think, unfortunately, does play a big role in how the system treats you. I think it's human nature in a way. When we find out some, like if, like I'll take me as an example. If I find out that someone's a Trump supporter, it doesn't necessarily make me hate the person, but it alters how I feel about them, and it definitely does change the way I treat them in a way. I don't think I would ever punch somebody for being a Trump supporter, but there are cases like that's the closest example I could put for that. And as far as like rehabilitation programs, again, like understanding people's cultural backgrounds. I think that's one thing that's so great about this country, is that we have so much diversity, and we have so much different kinds of people and different kinds of beliefs, which creates a beautiful thing. And sometimes these rehabilitation centers may not, uh, what's it called? Like they might not um, effectively address the needs, that's what I put, of these inmates, whether that be religious, or even going down to sexual orientation too. I'm not too sure what it's like to be like a gay man in an all-male prison, or rehabilitation center, or a lesbian, or trans, or something like that. I think things like that could benefit, and make somebody feel less um, bad, I don't know, about themselves. I think we talk a lot in class about why do people keep reoffending, and a main thing is like support and education. And I think also I kind of wanted to add this is like, I think part of it's just a lot of insecurity in themselves. They've never had somebody to support them and kind of help them go into the right direction. And when you go to a place that's already hell that you don't already want to be at, and then to find out that it's unsafe for you and you can't fully express who you are. I think that also plays a huge part in how you feel about yourself, and that just makes you angry. And for some people, that means going robbing somebody or going assaulting somebody. And yeah, I think effort towards inclusivity is a big thing. And I also thought about like socially anxious people in those kind of situations, finding a way for them to feel comfortable, mental health and things like that. Um, Something that, like a case that I kind of wanted to bring up was George Floyd. He was a black man, and he was accused, or people are saying that he uh, was trying to get the officers off him, like trying not to get arrested. I can't think of the other word right now, but he ended up dying. And I think no matter how aggressive the person is being, I think law enforcement really needs to find better ways to handle the people they're trying to arrest. And I don't know, it's a hard thing to wrap my brain around, um, because it's just like, what's the difference between me and somebody who has a darker complexion than I am? But George Floyd ended up dying and at the hands of an officer because the officer was being way too forceful with him. And like, George Floyd may have been able to breathe but not breathe comfortably because somebody's knees and your neck, if somebody's body weight's on your breathing airway, I don't think I could breathe either. um, but yes, that is my second video.